Testing, testing.
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, 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 Antoine. We can get started now. Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now in the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethay. And today's date is June the 4th, 2025, and we're all blessed to be alive. Ladies and gentlemen, if you join us on a regular basis, you know that the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, and the Positive Change Purchasing Corporate LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Corporate LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies. to address the high energy costs at our historically black colleges and universities, to utilize black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also, to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk Radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very, very blessed today to have a very, very dear friend of mine and a very, very dynamic individual, Mr. Antoine Thompson, who is the CEO and director of the Greater Washington Clean Cities Collaboration Group. And I've been a support of his organization, and I was very, very pleased finally to be able to get him here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future, with his economic impact on Black America. Welcome, Antoine.
Thank you. Thank you. Excited to be here. Very busy time in our region, in our country, and just thank you for all the hard work that you do to keep people informed, engaged, organized, and mobilized. So thank you for your leadership.
Well, I appreciate those kind words, Antoine. I wanted to have you on today specifically because I wanted to be able to sort of drill down on this nightmare on our street. Some folks are referring it to at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue as a big, beautiful bill, but I refer to it as a very treacherous bill as it relates to all of the hard work that has gone into the developing the new green economy that was put in place by the Biden and Harris administration. And on that note, we're looking at the U.S. House of Representatives seeks to kill the EV tax credit loan program. And before you go into that, Antoine, I'd like for you to sort of share with our listening audience a little more about the Greater Washington Clean Cities Collaboration Group and your background and the work that y'all have been outstanding work y'all have been doing around the area of EV charging infrastructure for low and moderate income communities around this country, and specifically Black and Brown communities as it relates to EV charging structure.
Yes, well, let me say our office, Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition, we are one of 100 plus clean cities and community organizations that span from here to Hawaii. We're a standalone nonprofit organization with a board of directors, members, partners, stakeholders, and donors and sponsors who help us do a lot of good work. It's a team effort to educate the community, do outreach, work on projects to reduce pollution in our environment, with the overall goal of reducing pollution and emissions so that we can improve public health. That's one of the things that people don't often talk about, is that pollution impacts your health. Some of these diesel vehicles and other vehicles, they have the ability to create cancer, accelerate asthma, and also accelerate and impact you in such a way that it reduces our life expectancy, how long you live, birth defects. And so we are in this fight to improve our environment in the transportation sector. We also work around environmental justice issues, looking at the disparities and the negative impacts that exist in our region, especially in DC and the first ring suburbs like Prince George's County and parts of Montgomery County, where neighborhoods, some people have a 7 to 12 year shorter lifespan because of the pollution from the transportation sector. We also work to try to get diverse groups of folks, minorities and women, access to some of the contracts and jobs that come from the clean energy sector as well. And we run a number of different projects, not just electric, but on the electric side, we do currently run around 10 or 12 different electric vehicle related projects and initiatives. We're currently uh, pushing out the next few months, giving away EV charging stations. That's right, giving away EV charging stations. We will give you the charging station. You will then have to get it installed. But we have some free charging stations that can go to community organizations, churches, small businesses, community centers that want to make sure that the public and their community has access to charging stations. We also run a number of other projects, everything from electric school buses, trying to make sure that school buses are powered by diesel fuel. And so we're doing a lot of outreach and education around electric school buses because our, 500,000 school buses are in the United States. Over 90% of them are powered by diesel. So we have a lot of work to do, and the air on a diesel bus is more toxic than standing behind the bus. So we run a number of programs and love to get into more of that.
Well, with that being said, Antoine, I was reading an article that I sent you a link. It was done by David Asher Parsons, and it was done on May 22nd. He writes in Reuters, which is an outstanding online blog. And on May 12th, he wrote an article. Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives Monday proposed killing the electric vehicle tax credit and repealing the fuel efficiency rule designed to probe automakers to building more zero emission vehicles as part of a broad based tax reform bill. The proposal, which is set for the House Ways and Means Committee's hearing on which was held several weeks ago on a Tuesday, would repeal the $7,500 new vehicle tax credit and the $4,000 tax credit for used vehicles uh, at the end of December of 2025. Now, it would maintain the tax credit for new vehicles and for additional years for automobiles who have not yet sold those vehicles that they have in inventory around the country. But I wanted to get your response to this because we know that the transportation infrastructure in this country is in dire need for repair. And because we have such problems with so many traffic jams every morning around our major cities, around our metropolitan areas, and with automobile accidents and everything else that goes into uh, people commuting back and forth from work on a day-to-day basis, it creates a very, very, very large percentage of the greenhouse gas emissions that we find in our atmosphere. And when we begin to look, and your organization has done some outstanding work at identifying what communities are more mostly impacted or disproportionately impacted by those freeway systems that have been built directly through those black and brown communities. Could you elaborate on those two areas? And I'd like to get your feedback around where do you think Congress will settle on this piece? Because the bill made it through the House by a slim margin, but I know there's been a little more pushback in the Senate because of the cuts to Medicaid and SNAP and the draconian cuts at HHS, which is taking away the entire staffing for the LEAP program for energy assistance programs. So if you could sort of pinpoint on those two things that I just spoke about, I would greatly appreciate your feedback and input for our listening audience.
Yeah, definitely. Two good questions. So first, it's important for all um, folks watching to understand that because of federal policy, uh, for many years we built highways right through many Black neighborhoods, and as a result of that, the neighborhoods where these highways that run through many of our cities, uh, the adjacent neighborhoods that they run through are typically of people of color, and so those neighborhoods have anywhere from a quarter of a mile to up sometimes up to 2 miles away. There are high concentrations of asthma and respiratory related illnesses uh, uh, in those surrounding neighborhoods. And so, what often happens when we talk about this federal bill, uh, we are leaving out the health of the impact of why. Why do we need electric vehicles and why do we need to support these efforts? Well, number one, for those who may or may not know, electric vehicles have no tailpipe emissions. So if they're idling on the highway going 5 miles per hour or sitting there on 95 or 295 or 50 or any highway in your area, um, the people nearby will not be breathing those emissions from the electric vehicles. Now we know that there are other big trucks and other equipment that will take some time to electrify, but we have another solution for that. But so electric vehicles are really important to not only improve public health, but also for national security purposes. As many of you are, some of you may be too young to remember, but the United States has been fighting in the Middle East over oil for the last 25 years or more. And so if we can get our country weaned off of this oil, few of our young people and their children and their grandchildren and great grandchildren will fight wars over who can get control oil in Africa, the Middle East, and also in parts of South America. The other thing is that the United States must be competitive, right? Understand that in Norway, in Sweden, in many parts of Europe, anywhere from 20% to 70% of their population are driving electric vehicles right now. So they're going to be living longer, mostly white communities. They will live longer. They already have a better healthcare system. Now they're going to be receiving less pollution because of gas powered and diesel powered vehicles. And so we need that benefit as well. People in our neighborhoods, all over the country, but especially in communities of color and in cities where pollution is higher, asthma rates are higher, kids miss school, more days of school because of respiratory related illnesses, adults miss more days of work because of respiratory related illnesses, more people in cities don't have health insurance, right? And so if we talk about doing all these things to increase pollution in the United States, meanwhile reducing people's health coverage, reducing education and awareness and prevention so that people can avoid and fight back against these harmful gases and toxins on their body, people should be concerned and speak up and do something, because these environmental laws didn't happen by accident. People had to fight to create the Environmental Protection Agency, because companies were killing people, polluting the water, polluting the air. They used to have smog days in the United States. Right now we do an ozone alert, but for years, for decades, we had what they called a smog alert, because the air was so toxic you couldn't even be outside. Right now in the DC area, we're worrying about fires going on, wildfires going all the way in Canada, right? Saying, and what's going to happen is that more people will miss work, they'll have asthma outbreaks. But before we had more environmental protection, that was the norm in New York City, in Washington, D.C., in every LA, in every major city in America where you had factories that polluted, they had black smoke, and they still do. And then you had all the cars and vehicles, and then you had no real environmental standards, so people would just burn trash randomly. So that's why we have to fight and work hard to remind people why we need not only electric vehicles, but environmental protection for people.
Well, on that note, Antoine, the president of the Electric Drive Transportation Association, Mrs. Geneva Colleen, criticized the proposal, saying that the plans to abandon the U.S. leadership in energy innovation is gutting federal investments in electrification, it's catastrophic, short-sighted. Proposal, she said, would deliver an enormous market advantage to our competitors like China, that threatens U.S. manufacturing jobs. In the U.S. in 2024 was more than $2 billion in sales rebates for EVs. Now, proposals leave in place key battery production tax credits and automakers and battery makers, but new provisions would bar the credit for vehicles produced with components made by Chinese companies under a licensing agreement with the Chinese firms. The provision would take away in 2027, could bar credits for cars powered by Chinese battery technology licensed in America's companies such as Ford Motor Company. Now, the House Republicans also proposed to kill loan programs that support manufacturing of certain advanced technologies for vehicles. It would rescind any unobligated funds and rescind corporate average fuel economy standards for greenhouse gas emissions by 2027 beyond. That proportion would take away the energy and commerce, be taken up by the Energy and Commerce Committee. Among outstanding loans finalized by Joe Biden's last week in office was $9.63 billion, a joint venture with Ford and South Korean battery manufacturers. Now, I'd like for you to sort of drill down on that aspect of it, Antoine, because most people are unaware that the red states were the biggest beneficiaries from the Biden-Harris Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction Act. I know personally because I'm originally from South Carolina, and that Joe Biden 2 years ago went to West Columbia and announced $12.3 billion in new investment for building of new plants. One of those plants is a lithium manufacturing facility, which a corporation out of Australia called Albemarle Corporation, their corporate headquarters here in the U.S. is in Charlotte, North Carolina. They broke ground to build and invest $1.1 billion in a lithium manufacturing facility in Chester, South Carolina. I'm also aware of the fact that You have a new uh, battery plant being built in Liberty, North Carolina, where Toyota is investing $30 billion over the next 30 years. But if they take away the tax credits for these incentives, what does, in your opinion, what does that do to this industry?
Yeah. Well, let me say that the United States is in a bad position right now, uh, which will put us in a place. The automobile industry, fueled and powered by 100% gasoline or predominantly gasoline, is a short-term reality. Um, if you, it's the equivalent of someone with a rotary phone. For all the old heads, remember there was a rotary phone, right?
Don't remind me of my age, my brother.
Right.
I happen to
Then we
be a
had a
baby.
pink phone, and then we went to a cordless phone. And now most people don't even have a home phone anymore. No one told you to get rid of your home phone. You just chose to find, you just found that that was ineffective, inefficient. And so many of us still have a home phone, but rarely use it. And most people don't call it. It's for emergencies, right? Now, if you're in the office, that's different. But even that, most office phones now are digital, and that has some pros and some cons to that. The point I'm getting at is that people trying to hold on to a legacy uh, of of transportation based on gasoline for the next 50, 100 years. It's not realistic. It's not realistic. And the danger for this, ladies and gentlemen, is not only is going to hurt your health, but the China, Russia, and European countries are mastering how to make electric vehicles, right? And so we are already a country where so many of the vehicles that we drive are not American made, right? And so when we think about computers, cell phones, laptops, televisions, anything that's electronic, much of it is not made in the United States. And the electric car is basically a bigger size of an electric toy, right? And if we miss this opportunity to innovate and to accelerate our deployment of electric vehicles, the same way you don't get TVs made in the United States, we will single-handedly put the auto industry out of business if we don't get serious by making sure that we have the incentives to buy electric cars. We're investing in research, technology, consumer behavior, so that these companies that have made these investments can not only sell them overseas, but sell them in the United States, where we have over 200 million vehicles, right? And so if we're not investing in electric vehicles, our companies, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, they will not be as competitive. And then you'll see them becoming like all the former TV companies that used to be made, and all the other. We have Apple headquartered here, but Apple doesn't make its vehicles in the United States. It's computers in the United States. So it's imperative that we invest in this research here, that we keep the incentives, because otherwise we're going to see. And I want you to understand, a lot of people may not have a Ford plant in their state, but they have other suppliers and vendors that impact the Ford trucks and cars and other things that they manufacture in GM. And so this is a matter of national economic security, right? And the same thing when it comes down to the minerals and other supply chain. If we're not careful, we will be spectators. And I just want to put this last point here, and I want to really bring this home. If you remember, COVID happened in 2020. America lost its way so bad, there was a conspiracy or a belief that COVID started in China. But because we didn't have our strong manufacturing stuff in place, where do we have to go to get our masks made at? In China. And they weren't even made, most of them weren't even made in a manufacturer. It was made in sweatshops, little offices and back alleys. And then they were sold to stores and hospitals and stuff like that. So we have our work cut out for us, and we should be very careful not to allow the next generation of people to have to depend on other countries for foreign oil, depend on other countries to make our cars, depend on other countries to make our electric vehicles and our supply chain. If we allow that to happen, it's shame on the United States of America.
Well, I've got to do this while I have you on for this visit today here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. I've got to switch the subject a little, and we've got to talk about the data centers which are being built around the U.S. And there was a recent article that was done talking about your home state of New York. And that article went on to talk about the fact that you have, in this article was done by Lauren Doblin, and it was published inside Climate News. And it went on to talk about New York is home to 4 of the largest Bitcoin mines in the country, which consumes huge quantities of electricity and water to cool their servers, farms. It emits a loud humming noise around the clock, and it floods the atmospheres with a conspicuous green gases and pollutants. In many cases, they are driving the residents there crazy. I'm within a mile and a half from the facility. This was Eric Robinson, a sociology professor at Canisius University in Buffalo, who lives close to a Bitcoin mine and the New York border and Canadian. It's how it hums, it sort of just sets in your ears. But what really caught my attention, Antoine, was the fact that people don't really realize how this is being driven by the fossil fuel industry. And they're using natural gas to fuel the turbines that provide the electricity. Now, there are, depending on the size of that data center, they can use as much energy as one data center it takes to power 100,000 homes. That is a significant input and impact on the grid structure. And it went on to say how this mining and crypto plays into this. Bitcoin is the largest and best known cryptocurrency. It's mined and decentralized network of Bitcoin users. A network of algorithms assigned to each transaction is unique, randomly identifying codes which Bitcoin mines. It derives by operating powerful computers day and night, running an endless series of random numbers to break down the code. Once a correct code is reached, confirming the transaction, which happens every across the average of every 10 minutes, a big miner coin miner receives 3,125 new minute Bitcoins each. Let me be very, very clear to our listening audience. Each worth around $95,000 each, which is the fee for helping maintain the network and keep it secure. The energy used for these operations is very high, which means the price of electricity governs where the mines are located. Now, the reason why this is so important is because the energy it takes to create and run these computers, the cost of that energy is calculated in the value of that Bitcoin, which means that when we really look at what is backing the currency, it's the electricity costs and the cost of using natural gas to power these electric turbines. There was a recent interview done by Roland Martin with a Representative Harris from the 91st District out of Southwest Memphis, who spoke basically, as we say, he spoke truth to power, where he talked about Elon Musk built 5 years ago a data center in Southwest Memphis, and on the permitting applications, they indicating that they were going to only have 15 turbines to power that data center. But because of the money that changed hands, I guess through the lobbyists to the political structure there in the city, no one went out and checked, Antoine. And when they finally someone went and checked, they found out they had 35 turbines. The medical data that they've been able to gather since that data center has been there for 5 years, and the reason why this came about is because Musk went in and applied for a permit to build another data center, and people have gone off, and they're talking about this as the poisoning of the black community in Memphis, because that's where this data center is built. So with that being said, looking at the impact that it's having on these small rural communities, both white, black, and the ethnicity doesn't really matter. They're looking at how and where they're locating these data centers. And I've had a conversation with you, and you said, based on the fact that you were from Buffalo in that area and Niagara Falls is there, those small rural towns which are set on the Canadian border, which are predominantly white communities, are the ones that's being impacted by these data centers. So when it's all said and done, we have to look at that as relates to the regulatory entities such as the PJM. For our listening audience, to break that abbreviation down, the PJM is the regulatory body that controls the legislative process of how power comes on into the 13 states, which starts with the tip of North Carolina, north borderline, the state of Virginia, District of Columbia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Illinois. which are all members of the PJM region, which has a population base of 65 million population, 20% of the US population. And it has a tremendous impact by these data centers. Matter of fact, this a recent article that we have on our news and events tab, and anyone can go to our news and events tab here on our platform at Positive Change by logging on to our website at positivechangepc.com. They want to click on our news and events tab, and they can scroll down and they'll find another article that's talking about the consumer watchdog accused regional grid operator of overcharging Marylanders for power. And that specific article speaks to the $800 million rate hike, which is coming about specifically because you have in Northern Virginia a number of data centers being built. And when those data centers are built, they impact the entire 13 states and the District of Columbia. And so what people have to understand, it doesn't make any difference if it's built in your backyard or not. If you have using electricity, you'll be impacted by the cost of that natural gas increase, which we were blessed that Governor Shapiro in December of 2023 filed with the Federal Regulatory Commission a suit, and he was able to get the Office of People's Counsel from the 13 states and U.S. attorneys' offices and the governors of those 13 states with the District of Columbia to come in to that class action, and he prevented a 1,800% rate increase that we were going to get on our on your gas bills, which would have hit June 1st of 2025, $21 billion rate hike. So I'm trying to sort of squeeze this in so I can get your feedback on how this is impacting what's going on in the marketplace as it relates to how and why the politics may be slanted toward, with the GOP, toward the fossil fuel industry. And I'd like to get your feedback on that.
Yeah. What I would say, two things. One, I got to run after this. I got another stop, but I want to thank you for having me on the program. What I would say to you right now, some folks are still very addicted to the fossil fuel industry, and we're going to need fossil fuels for a while. And I'm not advocating for getting rid of all of them. What I think we can do is we can come up with renewable stuff. I used to represent Niagara Falls in the state senate. In fact, I'm on my way to Buffalo in about an hour. I'll be back. I got to run up for a funeral, and I'll be back.
Sorry to hear that.
But there has been a challenge. One, believe it or not, people who live right in Niagara Falls don't have the lowest utility rates in the country, even though that power is generated right there. So much of the Northeast is powered by they get their electricity from Niagara Falls and other places, and that power is shared between the New York Power Authority is an entity that manages that, but they also have to co-manage it with Canada. And so there's it's a very nuanced discussion, very detailed things. But to make a long story short, we have to do more to get people's utility rates down, and uh, hydropower or power that's generated by water is one of the things that we need to continue to do. Um, the challenge, though, for us is that even though we have electricity, a lot of our electricity is powered by coal, right? Which is harmful to your health. And so there's this effort to keep things, even green things aren't totally green, but it's progress, right? And so as a a champion of the environment and clean energy, what I like for us to do is one, let's continue to invest. Let's make sure that the communities around some of these facilities and in some of these areas, especially seniors and low income people, that they get a chance to benefit from low cost, cheap power, but also the health benefits, right? And what people fail to realize is that so much of folks' uh, money literally goes out the window because they don't have energy efficient homes, they don't have solar on the roof. Much of they have old live in older properties, so they have old windows, old doors, outdated hot water tanks, and other energy efficiency systems. So that goes right out, and they're already in a high cost market, right? We have a lot of water around here, but that don't make our doggone water bill cheaper, right? No, right? It's not. I mean, my water bill just went up, right? And so that's the same thing with utilities. But that doesn't mean that we don't keep fighting to get the rates down. That doesn't mean we don't fight to get cleaner energy the same way. That doesn't stop us to make sure that we have cleaner water, even though the water is right here. It's a delicate balance between the environment and business, right? But if we don't have people protecting our interests, right, so that when we go get a glass of water or we turn on that light switch, that the light switch works, that the utility company is not exploiting us, that the water company is not doing that, the water is clean and it's safe. And so all these things work together. But unfortunately, what happens time and time again, if you are in a rural area, if you are in a inner city area and you're below the poverty line, you often get the short end of the stick. And we've got to be able to change that. And so that's what a lot of this discussion is about, is how do we protect all of us, but also how do we protect those who don't have deep pockets and not are marginalized, uh, and don't have as big a voice. uh, how do we fight for them and make sure that they're not left behind? So thank you, Mr. Ryan. I want to thank you for having me on, and hopefully you have me come back again.
Well, I'd love to have you back on the airways of Solar Now in the future with its economic impact on Black America. Antoine, anytime you have a open, all you got to do is let me know, and I'd be more than happy to have you on our platform on the Positive Change Radio, TV, Digital Podcast Network. And thank you once again for the work you do every day. And you
Thank
have a
you.
great day. All right.
Bye bye.
All right. All right. Bye bye.
Yes.
Ladies and okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had the opportunity to share with you an interview that I've been working on for some time to get uh, Mr. Antoine Thompson with the Greater Washington Clean Cities Collaboration Group on this platform, Solar Now in the future with its economic impact on Black America. Many of you know, ladies and gentlemen, that This show is brought to you every week by the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC, which serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American men locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also, to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now in the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. Ladies and gentlemen, we have about 12 more minutes left in our broadcast here today, and we're going to sort of drill down on some of the things that I brought up with Mr. Thompson before he had to leave. And we really appreciate him taking time from his busy schedule to join me on the platform today. But we want to look at, once again, an article which was done recently. And I reached back in our archives under our news and events to grab this article. This article was authored by Aman Arzar. It was done in Inside Climate News, which is an outstanding online news blog. And he talked about in Maryland office of the People's Counsel, the state's consumer watchdog has filed two major complaints against the regional power grid operator, arguing that its markets and infrastructure planning rules are systematically overcharging Marylanders, electricity consumers, to subscribe services and infrastructure benefiting other states, particularly the state of Virginia. In one of the complaints to the Federal Regulatory Commission, jointly filed with the state of Illinois and New Jersey agencies, the Maryland of the Office People's Counsel targets the PJM Interconnection Group in 2012 for 2025 and 2026 capacity auctions in July of 2024. Prices went surging from to $269.92 for a megawatt day, a staggering increase up from $28.92 for a megawatt day in the previous auction of 2023. That is a substantial 200% increase, ladies and gentlemen. According to the complaint, the overall auction cost increased from $2.2 billion to $14.7 billion in a single year, producing an unjustified spike in expenses for consumers. Grid that serves 13 states in the District of Columbia. And I mentioned those states earlier in our show today, talking about those 13 states that comprise the PJM region. The results reflects that the PJM consistent favoring of the interests of large corporations, utilities, and generators over consumers' interests. The Maryland People's Counsel, David S. Lapp, said in an email to the author of Inside Climate News. If successful, the claim would reduce a projected cost of over $5 billion. This was reported by the Office of the People's Counsel here in Maryland. The PJM spokesperson, Jeffrey Shields, said the PJM has not acknowledged the flaws in its auction rules. Sure, they haven't. Adding that the rule for 2025 and 2026 auctions were at the time of the auction and continue to be just and reasonable as approved by the Federal Regulatory Commission. He argued that the legal legally the result cannot be retroactive or changed. Well, if people stop paying their damn gas and electric bill, it can be if they were aware that they're being overcharged. And they're going to see this. We're all going to see this on our this month's bill, which is June 2025. Now, the reporter with Inside Climate News uh, reported a separate legal filing by an advocacy group, including the Sierra Club, which established the Baltimore gas and electric BG&E customers would see their monthly bills rise by 19% due to unprecedented charges and capacity. Okay? From these auction prices. The OPM argues that the spike was not due to any actual supply shortages, but instead was caused the Office of the People's Counsel for Maryland. This was their argument that the complaint argues that the spike was not due to any actual supply shortages, but instead was caused by PJM's rules, included two key power plants from the pool. They excluded two key power plants from the pool, that the Brandon Shore and the Wagner facility in Baltimore. These plants are funded by Maryland ratepayers to stay online for reliability reasons, were not counted as available supply to the auction. As a result, the filing said Maryland's consumers are now being asked to pay twice through their utility bills to keep the plants running, and again in the inflation auction prices, requiring that Maryland residents, consumers bear the massive cost of a contemporary bedrock rate making principle that allocates costs based on the cause of costs, and who benefits is it's lawful. It's not lawful. This is what Lapp, who's the general counsel for the Office of the People's Counsel here in Maryland, stated. Under Federal Power Act, capacity utility consumers cannot be required to pay twice for the same service. Let me repeat that, ladies and gentlemen. The person who is the general counsel for the Office of People Counsel here in Maryland stated that under the Federal Power Act, that we couldn't be billed twice for the same service that we're already paying for. Requiring Maryland residents to bear the massive cost is contrary to the bedrock of rulemaking. Now, this article went on to say the PJM owns independent market monitors, also said that in 2025-2026 capacity auctions didn't reflect the real market conditions, saying it was significantly affected by the flawed market designs. The Office of the People's Counsel complaints, citing that monitors finding that the estimate of the auction flaws, including the exclusion of power plants' capacity market variance, contributed to over $7.6 billion in excess charges prices to BGE zone. That means that we're having to pay this. I'm looking at my gas bill now that I've got to write a check on. So this is not something that's imaginary or pie in the sky. These are real pocketbook issues, ladies and gentlemen. Now, beyond the auction failures, the Office of People's Counsel also separately objected to PJM's proposed cost allocations for approximately $6 billion in new transmission infrastructure projects. In other words, we are being charged for BG&E, which is a subsidiary of Epsilon Corporation, to build these new transmission lines for these data centers. I'm not making any of this up, ladies and gentlemen. You can go to my website at positivechangepc.com. You can read this information for yourself. You know, we try to make it plain so the goats can get it. Now, we're at the close of another exciting edition of our show today, ladies and gentlemen. Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. We hope that we brought you news that you could definitely use. And remember, I want people to understand that this show, we don't have any sponsorship. Not that we don't want it, but we're working tirelessly to be able to get our numbers up, to get more people to come to the website, to get this information so that they can share this information with our communities around the country, because these things around energy is, my slogan is, everything starts with energy, everything ends with energy. Now, if you want to contribute to this platform, Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America, you can log on to our website and you can go to press on our donate button, and you can make a donation. Nothing's too small. And we have it sort of tied in with the organization that I am the chairman of the board of directors for, the National Association of Blacks in Solar, where you can take a write-off for contributing to this platform, because the National Association of Blacks in Solar is one of the sponsors of this program. So I wanted to make sure that I plug that while I have you listening to the show today. Once again, you can go and click on our donate button, and you'll be able to write that off, and we'll be able to provide that information through our tax ID information for the National Association of Blacks in Solar. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, as we say every week, we don't want you to meet us back here. We want you to beat us back here. And remember, if it is to be, it's up to me. Ain't nobody gonna save us but us. And I borrowed that from one of my mentors, Dr. Calvin Rolock of the Washington Informer newspaper. He has passed on, but his daughter does an outstanding job here in Washington, D.C. with their weekly online publication, the Washington Informer newspaper. So I want to give kudos out to them over at the newspaper, and for them being able to keep the legacy. Her daughter, Mr. Rolock's daughter, keeps the legacy alive and well. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, until next week, as we've indicated, we don't want you to meet us back here. We want you to beat us back here as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. And next